Russian President Vladimir Putin once proclaimed the dissolution of the Soviet Empire as the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. But then came Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Concerns are now rising among European nations that Putin could expand his offensive further into Europe over the coming decade, and they might have to face his forces without U.S. support. In an interview with The Times, Lieutenant General Alexander Solfrank, the commander of NATO's military logistics center in southwest Germany, urged allies to steer itself for potential Russian strikes on targets across Europe, including Germany. Other generals from the United States and the Netherlands are also worried that in this scenario, the Russians would strike deep behind their front lines on the civilian and military infrastructure. However, these warnings are partly based on the war in Ukraine, where Russia has launched heavy air and missile strikes well away from the battle lines. In retaliation, the Ukrainians have also knocked out ammunition dumps, command posts and fuel depots hundreds of miles into Russian-occupied territory. Meanwhile, over the weekend, German newspaper Bild reported that Germany's armed forces had already started planning for the eventuality of Russian cyber attacks and sabotage against German targets. The document outlined a potential path of conflict between Russia and the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance. However, specific data on the number and movement of NATO troops are withheld for security reasons. On the other hand, the Ukrainian president is fearing the Ukrainian conflict will escalate into a third world war if Russian aggression is not contained with the support from Kyiv's Western allies. He also urged Germany to use its economic heft to gather more support for Ukraine amid the prospects of potentially diminishing military aid from the U.S. due to Republican objections in the Congress. We earlier spoke to Matthew Drawn, who is a visiting fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies from Washington, D.C., and this is what he had to say.
Well, if we're talking over the coming decades, yes, certainly this is something that, at least if you're a sound military planner, you have to think about and prepare. Now, on the short term, I think this is less likely. I mean, if you're a rational decision maker in Moscow, although we have seen some irrational decisions in the past, but if you're already struggling to maintain the front line with the Ukrainians, I'm not sure you really want to involve NATO and its military power into the conflict. You'd rather probably seek diversion or distraction and maybe targets softer targets or weaker countries in the vicinity of Ukraine, such as Moldova or Georgia. But yeah, on the short term, I don't see any extension of the conflict. There's been let's say, tacit understanding between the West and Russia that the West would not directly target Russia and that Russia would not directly target NATO countries to keep escalation under control for both sides.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.